Welcome to the Leverington Church message series, Beyond Order and Chaos, a biblical encounter with Jordan Peterson's latest book. For the full series and additional resources, go to www.leverington.org. So let me ask you a question. If you're honest, have you gotten to the point where the things you used to tell yourself, the slogans you used to live by, just aren't cutting it anymore? Kind of like that lady. Or do you ever feel like this guy? Don't bother walking a mile in my shoes, that would be boring. Spend 30 seconds in my head, that will freak you right out. Are you feeling a bit burned out, a bit cynical, where the future just looks like more of the same? Have any of these statements ever come across your lips? Life doesn't bring me the joy it used to bring. Or, I just want to escape. I don't feel like doing anything. Or, this system is so corrupt. Why even bother? Or my favorite from a friend of Ruth's and mine, everyone is so gross. Now, these statements are true in that if you're feeling them, you're truly feeling them and they're truly genuine. But the thing is, they don't help you get off center. They don't change anything. In fact, they sabotage any chance of moving forward, of getting things to get better. Remember those words I told you about, that weird thing where I got in the middle of the night, these words just came to me and I scribbled them down? They've been staying with me, those words from a couple weeks ago. That voice that said to me, don't listen to the choices, don't be a slave to the behaviors that keep you trapped inside the box of the present you. Who knows who you could become? Okay, well, what do we do then? What do we do to move forward? To regain a sense of purpose and meaning for our lives? Well, Jordan Peterson tells us to look in the most unlikely place. His rule number 4 for living life well is this: notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. And I want to speak especially to those of you who are young in your careers today. Think about this first in terms of your career. In other words, when you see something important that isn't getting done at work or in an organization or in our church, there are two things you can do. You can say, why doesn't somebody do something about that? Or you can voluntarily step up to the plate and take responsibility for it. Instead of being passive and complaining, do something about it. Also, whoever's listening to music, if you could just turn that down because I'm having a hard time hearing. I'm sorry. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Think about that. I can just say, why doesn't somebody else do it? Or I can kind of step into the plate and take responsibility for it. So instead of being passive and complaining, I can do something about it. And why? Just because it's the right thing to do. Just because it needs to be done. Well, what's the benefit of living that way? Well, in addition to the fact that it might be the right thing to do, it might be even what God's calling you to do, it is one of the best ways there is to get ahead. It is. And it's one of the best ways to feel good about yourself, to move up in your career, to be truly useful to your company, doing something worthwhile, because all of that is much, much better for your soul than the corrosion that comes from just being passive and complaining and judgmental and cynical. So here's the first question for you today. Is there a place in your life where you are saying, somebody ought to do something about that? Now, there's no absolute guarantee that if you live this way, you're going to get that raise or that promotion. In fact, if you live this way, it is possible that someone might take advantage of you. But I agree with Peterson. This is one of the best ways to build your career. Because, as I'm going through these lessons of his, let me tell you the very scientific, complicated process I use after I read his chapter each week. I go, do I buy this? Is this real? Does this work? And I just realized this week, thinking about that statement, that my life reflects that statement. So when I was an engineer, I was in my job and I was in it for several years, and frankly, my career was going nowhere. It was just like there. And one day, a guy higher than me, one of my higher ups, who was not my boss, somebody over here, came and said, hey, could you help me with this? I'm like, yeah. So I volunteered, and my whole trajectory for the rest of my career started on that day. Further, when I think about when I hired people, what did I look for? I looked for people who lived that way. I was looking for people who would stick and stand up to the plate. I was looking for people who weren't trying to do the bare minimum, but people who I really want to accomplish something. I really want to get something done. I want to make things happen. I was looking for people who took the initiative. And so that is true. This is the way the world works. And sometimes we just think, well, they ought to just see how great I am, No, people are looking for solutions. And when you volunteer those solutions, people remember and they notice. Now, a lot of us like the idea of being in charge, right? Or being on top, or being the boss, or being the leader, having authority. But very few people are willing to take the path that leads to deserving to be in charge, to being an actual good leader. Here's how Mike Benedictus says the steps to growing in your career or growing in your influence in the world works. First, just like Jordan Peterson, he says, there is opportunity where no one is taking responsibility. Second, responsibility flows to those who actually show up. Not those who talk the talk, not those with the fantasy. People who show up are consistent, can be depended on. And third, authority falls to those who take responsibility. Authority is given to those who prove themselves by taking responsibility upon themselves that they didn't have to, by showing up, by coming through, by working hard, by keeping their word, by being responsible. Now, there is a name for people who want to be in charge but don't want to be responsible. That's called being a terrible leader. That's what that is. So doesn't this all sound kind of hard? That sounds like a lot of work, a lot of stuff to do. Isn't there an easier way to be successful? Isn't there an easier way to find meaning for your life? Jordan Peterson writes, it appears that the meaning that most effectively sustains life is to be found in the adoption of responsibility. It is strange and paradoxical. It's a strange and paradoxical fact that there is a reciprocal relationship between the worth of something and the difficulty of accomplishing it. Difficulty is necessary. Any of you have been watching the Olympics and being amazed? Difficulty is necessary. Well, how much responsibility should I take on? How much should I take on? Because the right size challenge will help you grow. What will the wrong size challenge do? Set you up for failure or crush you if it's not a good fit. Peterson goes on, how is it possible to gauge the rate at which challenge should be sought? It is the instinct for meaning. The instinct for meaning, something far deeper and older than mere thought. Deeper and older than mere thought is the need for meaning. That's what holds the answer. Does what you're attempting compel you forward without being too frightening? Does it grip your interests without crushing you? Does it eliminate the burden of time passing? Does it serve those you love and perhaps even bring good to your enemies. That is responsibility. Constrain evil, reduce suffering, confront the possibility that manifests in front of you every second of your life with the desire to make things better regardless of the burden you bear, regardless of life's often apparently arbitrary unfairness and cruelty. Step up and take responsibility anyway. Peterson goes on, it is unlikely that whatever optimizes your life across time is happiness. Well, what is a truly reliable source of positive emotion? The pursuit of a valuable goal. You must act reliably, honestly, nobly, in relationship to a higher good in order to manifest the sense of responsibility properly. Because you know people that are very responsible and they're also mean jerks, right? You don't want to be that either. He concludes, it is necessary to lift your eyes above the horizon to establish a transcendent goal if you wish to cease being a puppet under the control of things you don't understand and perhaps you don't want to understand. So what's he saying? He's saying you need to look at the big picture. You need to keep your eye on what really matters. You need to play that upper game that we were talking about, you Hogwarts lovers. You need to keep the game above the horizon. You need to have a transcendent goal, something that's bigger than just trying to get ahead, just trying to make more money, just trying to get a bigger home, just trying to get fancy titles, just trying to be a somebody. All right, well, what should this primary greatest goal of my life be? What should this transcendent goal above the horizon of everyday life be? Jesus was asked this very question. In Matthew chapter 22, starting in verse 36, the philosophers of the age came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment? Which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." You guys, at the end of my life, that's what I want to be able to say. That I love the Lord my God with all my heart and soul and mind and strength. And I tried to love my neighbor as myself. That's what I want to be able to say. And those of you who, like me, think in terms of numbers and calculations, those of you who are competitive and want to achieve great things, note, he's saying the greatest achievement is not material. It's relational. It's relational. That having this deep, loving relationship with God and then the people that are all around me, that is the ultimate goal. But this is so broad, right? I mean, it can be so easy to misinterpret that and make it just mean whatever I want it to mean. I need to know the way to go. I need to know what is really true. I need to know how this actually applies to my life. The way, truth, life. Is there one place, one source from where I can draw what it actually means to live this way? Well, just like the sun comes up in one place but gives light to the whole world, there is one place. 2,000 years ago, Jesus stood up in the middle of time, and this is what he said. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. There's nothing more important, more foundational, more the source of ultimate meaning in my life than encountering God, and we do that through the gateway he provided, Jesus himself. And you might say, okay, but what does all this religious stuff have to do with my goals for my career and the really personal things in my life, like finding meaning and purpose, and how do I raise my kids? How does it have to do with any of that. Well, what do we need for a meaningful, hopeful life? I can think of three things. First, we need to know where we're going, and we need to be convinced we're headed the right way. Like when you're not sure if you're going the right way, life is not good. We need to be sure we're heading the right way, that our life is moving towards something. Jesus said, I am the way. Number two, we need to know what is real, what is true, what can be dependable and counted on in a world full of ambiguity and confusion and uncertainty and propaganda. Jesus said, I am the truth. Third, we need a life worth living, like a way of being that's filled with an inner peace and a hope. Why? Because we know that we're known. We know that we're loved. We know deep in our bones that we're worthwhile and what we do matters, that our life matters. And Jesus said, I am the life. Listen, I believe this. You can correct me later if I'm wrong. And those of you online, you guys are using the chat on YouTube, if you can think of anybody who said anything nearly as outrageous as this, put it up on YouTube. Listen to the most outrageous claim Jesus made about himself in Matthew chapter 28. In verse 18, he says this, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Let that sink in. Who's it been given to him by? God the Father. This is why he said no one comes to the Father but through me. All authority on heaven and earth have been given to me. Jesus isn't being very wise politically here, is he? How is his press secretary going to be able to walk this one back? Well, when he said that, what he really meant was, no, there's no wiggle room. There's no wiggle room. He has just reduced reality to a binary function, either or. Either this is true about him or it is not. Either or. Either he is the Lord or he is a liar or he is a lunatic. So you guys, which do you say he is? Which do you say he is? You see, there's no hedging your bets. Jesus is intentionally forcing me to make a choice. Is there any bigger game to be played in your life? Is there any bigger game to be played, any pursuit more important, any adventure that is wilder than following Jesus? I don't think so. Well, then what should we do? Jesus tells us in the very next verse, verse 19. Therefore, because I am the way, the truth, and the life, and I actually have this authority, therefore, because I can actually give people the hope they need in their world, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So apparently theology really matters. He's talking about the Trinity. And teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. So apparently how we behave in this world and how we use our bodies really matters. And surely I am with you always, even to the very end of the age. So I'm giving you this charge, but I'm not saying you just go out and do it alone. I'm saying when you live this way, when you step out into this, I will go with you. We are to help other people discover the joy of knowing Jesus and walking with him. We are to help them experience just how good it is to be with God and to teach them the truth and how to walk in it. You see, guys, I don't think he was just saying this to the first disciples. I think he's saying it to me. I think he's saying it to you right now in the present tense. This is what you are to do. I think I can tell you at least one of the things that you're supposed to be doing with your life. I am daring in this moment to prophesy over your life and tell you what responsibility you're supposed to pick up. You have a responsibility to help other people encounter the hope, meaning, and purpose that comes from knowing Jesus. You have a responsibility to bring about the worship of God and the love of neighbor. Have you ever been with another person when the lights went on? When the lights went on in their soul? When they suddenly realized, wait, God is real. Wait, This is about what my life could be like. God is real. And they become so excited and they want to learn more, and they're studying the scriptures on their own, and they're taking responsibility for their own spiritual journey. You guys, if you haven't experienced this is the most beautiful, amazing experience in life. And it's you, ordinary me, us little hobbits, it's you who could help someone come to that point in their life. You might say, well, I don't even know if I believe any of this stuff myself. I mean, I'm still on my journey. I'm full of doubts. I'm full of questions. I'm not really at a point where I'm all in yet. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What steps are you taking to turn into your doubts and face them and do research and decide exactly what's at stake? Have you kept your doubts vague and general, hidden in the fog like we talked about last week? You know what I did? I just kept it all in the fog. I don't even want to think about maybe I'll get religious sometime later. I just kept it in the fog. Why? Because if it came out and it was clear, we're afraid then we'd have to be responsible. We'd have to act. We'd have to choose. Are you taking responsibility to decide once and for all about Jesus? Either you are going to follow him in the future or not. Ben, I'm going to ask you to turn the monitors off. Man, I'm going to do an exorcism on this equipment in just a minute. In the name of Jesus. No, okay. Are you open to this possibility for your life? That Jesus is really kind of forcing you to make a decision this way or that way. And for those of you who do love Jesus, like, hey, no, man, I'm walking in the light and I'm walking with Jesus, but I feel inadequate. I feel shy. How do I tell people about Jesus? I'm not that quick on my feet. I've got my own doubts. Well, then just do what you can and speak up one-on-one when the Spirit of the Lord is leading you. And I want to take a moment. It's funny. I want to take a moment, actually, though, to talk to those of you who are helping us with the technology, and those of you up there that are helping us, and those of you who are helping us in the children's ministry, and those of you who are helping us with the cafe and with buildings and ground, and those of you who are helping to feed those who are hungry. All these efforts that you guys are part of, all these things, the ways you guys are contributing, are all allowing our church family to get the gospel out. So when you participate in those things, you are helping make this happen. And it's so needed and it's so beautiful. And I'm so thankful for the way many of you have seen a responsibility that nobody was taking, and you stood in and you went in and you filled that gap. I think about Chris Epstein stepping into the gap and making children's ministry run. I think about Joan Schillinger seeing we have nobody in the nursery and stepping in and taking on that ministry. I think about David Craighead saying, there's no one to clear the snow or cut the grass. I will step in and take that upon myself. Think about COVID. A bunch of you during COVID, you stepped up to the plate and you said, people aren't connected and our family is being shredded apart. And so I want to thank Amelia and Adelaide and Simone for creating the walk in the Wissahickon. What a great idea. I want to thank Connie Lundahl for doing this lunch bunch for retired folks. What a great idea. I want to thank George and Karen who said, let's step into the gap and offer a meal where people can get together. What a great idea. Sue Major, I need to help people because we're not praying for each other. I'm going to step into the gap and start a prayer ministry. And so many of you have done so many things, and I'm going to miss mentioning people. But you see what they did? They saw there was nobody's taking responsibility for this. I'm going to step in and do it. If you feel God is calling you to do something, I and our church leaders will do everything we can. And if it's a good fit with our vision, we will support you and we will give you resources. Now, if you come to me and go, Langdon, I really feel the Lord is calling me to start a naked yoga group. We might be, yeah, we'll get back to you on that. But almost everything else, we would want to support you in that. Is there something that you feel like maybe the Lord is calling you to do? So, there is just one more. Those are all beautiful things. There's just one more thing. One more thing you need to do. You need to open your mouth. I'm sorry to say this because this is going to mess up some of your theology, but I'm declaring what I believe is true. You do not share the gospel by your good deeds alone. I just love people, and that's how they experience the gospel. I'm sorry. No, you have to open your mouth. When I was an atheist, let me tell you what I thought. When really nice, loving, giving Christians were really good and kind and loving to me, do you know what I thought? I thought, wow, that's a really nice person. Period. That's as far as it went. I would still be lost. I would still be wandering around as a pagan trying to find some meaning and purpose in this life if I hadn't had friends who had the courage to open their mouth and talk to me about Jesus, even knowing I would probably mock them for it, which I did. But they took that responsibility upon themselves. I want you to think about your ministry of modeling the Christian life to people this way. You guys have heard this a million times. Give me a fish, feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, then you feed me for life. When you're loving and kind to me, that's like giving me a fish for today, as long as you're with me. But when you introduce me to the author of love, that's teaching me to fish. Now I can access the same power you have. Now I don't need you to model it to me anymore. Now I can see it for myself. You might say, well, I don't want to preach at anyone. You don't need to preach at anyone. Listen to what D.T. Niles says. What is Christianity? Christianity is one beggar telling another beggar where he found the bread. I believe that to the bottom of my heart. Christianity, you reduce it down, what is it? One beggar telling another beggar where he found the bread. Okay, well, how do I do that? I'm going to tell you. You just need to do the 3 steps that we've talked about here before. Their story, your story, his story. Here's how to be faithful to God and totally respectful of the other person. Not trying to talk them into anything, not trying to force them, not trying to do a sales job on them, not trying to fill them with guilt. Rather, putting them in the driver's seat of the conversation and honoring them with your presence. Here's a way to evangelize. That word isn't all the ugly things you hear. Evangelize is one who brings good news. Not a political movement, not a bunch of mean, nasty jerks. One who brings good news goes, I found the bread over here. Here's a way to evangelize that honors God and gives a great gift to the other person. When you encounter another person and you feel that God is calling you to open your mouth, just go as far down this road as the other person wants to go. You start by taking a real, genuine interest in the other person with no agenda. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to pretend I'm interested in your life so I can give you the sales job later. No, that's demonic. That's demonic. No, this person was created in the image of God. They are a mystery. You've never encountered an average person. They are a beautiful creation of God. The more you talk to people, the more interesting they become. To genuinely say, I want to know about your life. Tell me about your history. Tell me what you love to do. Tell me what you're thinking about. When you do that, you give a person the gift of presence. How many of you have ever had someone do that for you? Oh, it feels so good. It's such a gift for someone to just be present to me and acknowledge that I matter. It's such a beautiful, when people give that to me, it is such an amazing, beautiful gift. Now, if that's as far as the conversation goes, that's as far as it goes, and that's great. You've done a good and beautiful thing. But then if they turn around and go, well, tell me about your life, well, then you can tell them about your life. Now they're giving you a beautiful gift. Now they're giving you their presence. But you see, if you ask me about my life, I can't talk long without talking about Jesus, right? If God is really the center of my life, then eventually I'm going to talk about the center of my life. Not in a crazy, weird way, but you know what? This is really important to me. And I went from being on my own to being convinced that God is real, and he has changed my life in good and beautiful ways. And if you see them and go, oh boy, well then that's as far as you go. But if they ask you, tell me about that, don't be a wimp. Open your mouth. Don't abdicate your responsibility. This is a beautiful thing that we get to do. It's hard, it's scary. The other person might think you're a weirdo. They might reject you. Well, guess what? If they're going to reject you now over your faith, they're going to reject you later anyway. Better to get that out of the fog. Like, better to know, okay, well, this is, our relationship is limited to this. That's okay. It's good to know that up front. This, my friends, is where the responsibility has been abdicated by the church. So many Christians refuse to take the risk to open their mouth. This is where opportunity lurks. This is where the Holy Spirit lurks. God could use you to change the trajectory of another person's life forever, giving them access to hope and meaning and purpose that they couldn't have conjured up for themselves. They may not accept it. Fine. But they'll never have a chance to accept it if the offer isn't given. So if you ask me, Langdon, what do you think is best for our own lives? If you ask me, what do I think is best for our neighbors, best for our neighborhood, best for the future of our church, this is it. That we would open our mouths. If you ask me what responsibility would most help me get off the sofa, back into the game of life, truly feeling like my life had deep meaning and purpose, this is it. That each of us, that I'm called, you're called to be an ambassador for Christ. That we see that as our first job behind all the other little jobs that our life is full of. This is a responsibility everybody is hoping someone else will do. Nope. There's nobody else here but us chickens. It's only us. It's only us. So even at this moment, while you're listening to me go on way too long, is there somebody's face that comes to your mind? Somebody that needs Jesus? Is there someone you should be sharing your faith with? Let's pray. Father God, you are telling us that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. And God, I want to not abdicate that. I want to be willing to open my mouth. Not like I have all the answers, not that I'm all squared away, but to just say, this is where I found bread. This is where life is found. Lord, I ask that you would help us to keep our eyes wide open to our neighbors, that we would love them in good and beautiful ways, but also that we would really take a true, genuine interest in them, in what's going on in their lives, in the history of their lives, and what they care about. And Lord, help us to be sensitive to your Spirit. When you're calling us to open our mouths, please, Lord, don't let us be wimps. Give us courage. Help us to speak in good and kind and winsome ways. Help us to bring our friends home. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for joining us today as we strive to think carefully about our faith. You can help keep this ministry on the air by making a donation at leverington.org. For now, may the Lord bless you and keep you. We'll see you next time.